Folks, welcome back to Roske on Politics. Always grateful to be chatting with current elected officials. Today is no exception. Thanks so much to Congresswoman Cindy Axne. Thanks for being on the program.
Well, great to be here with you today.
So this is one of the key races that this program is focused on. Axne versus Young, Ernst versus Greenfield, and of course the presidential race. But you have been a member of Congress now for quite some time. The last time I spoke to you, you'd just been elected. How has your first term been so far?
Well, let's just say we've been busy. Started in a government shutdown and now we're in a pandemic. So listen, my mom used to say I'd take off more than she thought I could chew, but I always was able to handle it. So I'm glad I've got the trust of the people here in Iowa. We've had a lot to do from trade wars, to the renewable fuel standard waivers hitting our district, to the pandemic, to social unrest. So it's been something else. I'm glad I'm doing it. I can tell you that 10 years of serving in both the Democratic and Republican administrations here at multiple levels at the state has been really good for me to have that background to go in and understand how we can better do things in a government that quite honestly needs a little bit of readdressing at this point.
So let's talk about that. You know, in my estimation, it seems like the two sides are fighting worse than they have in a long time. And I discussed with your opponent right now, where do you see, now that you're actually in the House of Representatives, where's common ground? Are there issues that exist right now that the two parties can actually get together on?
Yeah, there's a handful, and as a matter of fact, I like to point out that I have one of the most bipartisan records in the House. I introduce all of my bills with a Republican colleague. I know that there's no better way to get things done than to actually have support on the other side so you can move an agenda forward, and I'm out there to get things done. And so for me, that's been a priority. I'll tell you, the areas where we can find a lot of support, agriculture seems to be one of those, and I sit on the agriculture committee, so being able to help our farmers, ensuring that we put food on the table of people in this country is one area where we can find support. Listen, we just were able to pass the Great Outdoors Act and have the president sign that into law, so protecting our public lands and leaving a legacy for this country seems to get support. And I'd say in general, when it comes to some key economic drivers related to COVID, we've got some understanding that we've got to get something done there. And I would tell you that there's a heck of a lot of people that would prefer that we could do things more in a bipartisan fashion. And I talked to both Democratic and Republican colleagues about this. And there are people who are ready to take this to this next level. There's just some people that have made too much out of only representing their sides. But we'll get over that.
You know, I think one of the biggest issues comes up every time I chat with folks about politics. Healthcare, obviously there's many different roads to what people think would be an improvement. What would be the Axne plan to improve American healthcare?
Listen, I've been saying since the beginning, let's shore up the Affordable Care Act, keep people with pre-existing conditions covered, lower the cost of prescription drugs, and introduce a public option. I think everybody should be able to buy into Medicare or Medicaid. We shouldn't have to have good quality affordable health insurance tied to a job. We absolutely need to make sure that it's affordable. I've been fighting for things like closing the reimbursement gap rate between our rural health clinic and our urban health clinics. That's a bill that I wrote. There's too much within our system that we need to look at structurally. So I often say to people, you can name this a lot of different things, whatever you want to name it. We still have to go in and look at some of the key components that are keeping our healthcare system from functioning in any way that it should be, no matter if you call it public option, Medicare for all, or ACA, or keep it as is, whatever it is. We got a lot of work to do.
A decade of war has taken an unprecedented toll on our men and women in uniform.
Our veterans are the bedrock of our society. They are leaders whose strength and honor place them among our community's most valuable assets. But everyone's journey home is not the same.
Tragically, hundreds of thousands of our veterans are suffering from the trauma of war.
Without assistance, the downward spiral can be quick and destructive. An average of 22 veterans take their own lives every day.
It doesn't have to be this way.
At Justice for Vets, we believe that every veteran should have the opportunity for treatment and restoration.
That is why Justice for Vets has been working to establish veterans treatment courts across the nation.
Instead of allowing our veterans to languish behind bars, these courts connect veterans to the treatment they need, the services they've earned, the support they deserve.
Veterans treatment courts hold our veterans accountable for their actions.
By providing structure, treatment, and mentoring, These courts help our veterans and their families get their lives back on track.
And veterans treatment courts work.
They're working by returning healthy veterans to their families, sending veterans back to school, helping them find jobs, and putting veterans back into service in our communities.
Veterans treatment courts are nationally recognized as the most innovative and effective solution for saving the lives, families, and futures of our veterans, while saving tax dollars for the American public.
Justice for Vets is the only national organization dedicated to the expansion of veterans treatment courts.
With 2.6 million veterans of the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, there is an urgent and growing need for more veterans treatment courts. And Justice for Vets is the only organization capable of meeting this demand.
We ask much of our men and women in uniform, and they ask little in return. It is our collective duty to come to their aid when they struggle on the home front. This not only honors their sacrifice, but makes our communities stronger.
A donation to Justice for Vets helps put a veterans treatment court within reach of every veteran in need.
A donation to Justice for Vets keeps veterans in treatment where they belong.
A donation to Justice for Vets shows your commitment to leaving no veteran behind.
A donation to Justice for Vets will help save lives, restore families, and rebuild communities.
Get involved and go to justiceforvets.org.
Veterans fought for our freedom. Now it's our turn to fight for theirs. Thank you.
The pandemic, we're obviously a few months into it right now. How do you think the response has been at the state and federal level? What would you like to see change, improve upon?
Oh boy, I'll be honestly, I believe that we could have gone through this pandemic and come out with less deaths and a better opportunity to restore our economy more quickly had we followed some early protocol that other countries have, and that they've been doing much better than we have in those regards. So certainly I would have liked to have seen that when Defense Production Acts were put into place by this president to keep essential workers on the job, like our meatpacking plants, that then a Defense Production Act would have been put in place to make sure that they had the PPE and the supplies they needed so that those workers didn't get sick and carry that home and exacerbate the issue. I certainly think that we've got a lot to look at with the schools reopening and making sure that we're putting kids back to school in a safe way, but in a way that everybody feels comfortable with as well. So I think had we early on done more with mask mandates, made sure that there was PPE and appropriate supplies in this country. I was fighting literally for tests and supplies to come here and calling test providers and actually getting them into our labs. That's how much we had to do on the ground, because at a national level that wasn't happening. So had we followed some of those, and I'll be honest, had we done some early shelter in place, we would have seen this go through more quickly, and we could be getting back to work more quickly.
Is there an argument that says Iowa, I mean, we see woods around us right now. Is there an argument that says Iowa is more spread out? It didn't have to be that strict, or don't you see it that way?
Well, I certainly think there's areas of Iowa where we haven't seen as much impact, and so probably being more strict there wouldn't have been as necessary. The problem is, it's hard to put a piece of policy in place in a state that you say, well, here you don't need it and here you need it. We have people who travel in and out of counties to work. We have people who travel back and forth from counties for health care. We have people who travel here to the Des Moines area on a regular basis because of the State House and other big businesses here. So I think if we had to do something, it has to be holistic, because it truly is those gaps where we're seeing the issues happen. And I'll be honest, one of my biggest pain points, and I find it shameful for our state, is that we've let too many older Iowans die in nursing homes by themselves because we didn't take the right protocol to send test centers out to those locations like I've requested that we do for the governor.
A few years ago, one of the guests on the program was former Speaker Newt Gingrich, and he and I talked about political theater and how he and President Clinton at the time would get on the cameras and go at it, and then afterward have conversations and try to get together on budget, etc. Now that you've actually served some time in the U.S. House of Representatives, is it as bad as the news would say it is? Are the two sides as far apart as what we're led to believe?
I think, listen, there's a lot of differences between the two sides of what, in regard to some of these bigger issues. And right now, what's happening as a result of COVID, we're seeing these inequities in this country just laid bare. Whether it's the inability for people to afford a good roof over their head because rates and pay are so low. Affordable housing needs a lot of emphasis because we don't have a lot of good places for people across this country. Healthcare that they can't afford. There are people right now wondering if they will be stuck with a COVID bill because they don't have appropriate insurance. So we're seeing all these issues come to light. And we realize that it's something that we have to be thoughtful of and work on. And unfortunately, on the Democratic side, we're trying to push for some of those issues to have more support behind them, more support to making sure that our kids go back to school safely or in school safely, more support for hospitals and healthcare providers as they continue to struggle through this. And on the Republican side, they're looking at much more just shoring up relief, very straightforward and as minimal as possible. Listen, I agree that we should be economically, we should absolutely ensure that we're getting the best out of taxpayer dollars. I spent a decade in state government holding it accountable, and I want to make sure that we're effective and efficient. But to do so during a pandemic, you ask any economist, this is not the time to cut back. Now is the time to make the investments that are appropriate for getting our economy back on track and not to go small on any of those. We can work out what the expenses look like in the future. Let's make sure that we keep people alive right now.
Folks, we're going to take a quick commercial break. We'll come right back with Congresswoman Cindy Axne. Don't go anywhere. Hey folks, my program Roske on Politics will be returning every Sunday morning the whole month before the election. We're going to be focusing on 3 races. You've got former Congressman David Young versus current Congresswoman Cindy Axne. You got Ernst versus Greenfield, and of course, President Donald Trump versus former Vice President Joe Biden. But we're also going to be talking to community leaders because the controversy and the conflict that is so rampant in today's American politics, we're going to do what we can to help unify this country before this historic election. That's every Sunday, the whole month before the election. I hope you'll tune in. Hi folks, welcome back to the program, chatting with Congresswoman Cindy Axne. And now we were talking about a little bit about the political parties, how they seem to be apart on quite a few different things. Let's talk about the race right now. I've heard on the Democrat side that there seems to be some type of distance between the progressive part of the party and the moderates in the party. Do you see that in Washington? Do you think that's going to affect the outcome in November?
You know, we're a big tent as a Democratic Party. We bring a lot of ideas to the table. I think we're all working together to make sure that we're addressing the issues that Americans across this country are facing. And I know I'm doing the work that I need to be doing here for the people in the great 3rd District of Iowa. I was out there, I'll tell you, Brent, maybe about three months in, and I took a look around. I think I looked up at the voting board and I said, my God, there's 50 reps from California and 40 from New York and 30 from Florida. I've got to be the voice of 10 representatives for me to get the job done for Iowans out here. And so whether I was bringing home $3 billion for our flood or standing up against the administration and the EPA's issuance of renewable fuel standard waivers, that's what you got to do. And so for me, it's truly been how I've approached this job. I will stand up for what's right for the people here in our state. I will make sure that I push back against anybody, whether it's my own party, if it's not working for the people here in our district. And I've done both. And so I'm going to make sure that their voices are heard. And so for me, I take all of those things into consideration. I know that there's progressive versus moderate, as I think so many people would like to say, but I think the majority of people are doing what I'm doing, especially those of us who flip seats. We're truly working for the people in our districts.